Good afternoon, Mohammed. You wrote to me asking my opinion on a number of points, and I'm making this video to try and answer those points, I hope, to your satisfaction. First of all, as you know, just as an introduction, if you happen to want to show this video, my name is Ahron Cohen, Rabbi Ahron Cohen. I'm an Orthodox Jew, that is, a Jewish person who endeavors to live his life in accordance with all the requirements of the Jewish religion. The particular subject of our remarks this afternoon is concerning Palestine and the Neturei Karta, and I'll try to answer your questions on those points as we come to them. The first point you asked was, in recent years the Neturei Karta has become more popular than ever for supporting the Palestinians. So you asked me to explain my activities in this organization, and the reason why the organization supports the Palestinian people. Well, first of all, let me make it quite clear. Neturei Karta is not an organization. Neturei Karta is the name of those Orthodox Jews who oppose Zionism. As I'm sure you know, Zionism is a nationalistic movement which started about 120 years ago and was formed by secular people, not religious people, who had a nationalistic idea, nationalistic agenda. But nothing to do, they were of Jewish extraction, but they had nothing to do with the Jewish religion as such. The Jewish religion actually opposes Zionism. It's totally incompatible with Zionism. Zionism is, first of all, a nationalistic, as I mentioned earlier, a nationalistic idea. Just the idea of finding a national home for the Jewish people, whereas Judaism is a total way of life. And included in this total way of life is, in fact, the opposition to the idea of forming a national home for Jewish people. It's quite a long subject. I don't want to go into all the details this afternoon, but the fact is that according to our religion, the Jewish people are, in this day and age, in what we call a divinely decreed state of exile. That is, we believe and we are taught that the Almighty has put us in a state of exile, and we're not allowed to try and fight our way out of it or to force our way out of it by our own efforts, this would be considered to be in opposition to the wishes of the Almighty. So from a religious belief point of view, we are not allowed to have a state of our own. Our job is to live in exile as loyal, law-abiding citizens in any country in which we find ourselves, and not to try and with our own efforts to form a state of our own. That is from a religious point of view. Also from a humanitarian point of view, forming a state in somebody else's land, which is basically what the Zionists wanted to do, has very serious humanitarian implications. It means taking away somebody's land, in this case the Palestinians, who were the indigenous population. And part of our religion is, in fact, to be compassionate and consider other people's feelings. To try and take a land by force away from another people would also be against our religious ideals, and this is something which the world at large can understand. So, you asked why. Well, yes. So I'm saying that we're not an organization. Neturei Karta is the name given to those Orthodox Jews who understand that the nationalistic idea of Zionism is wrong. And it's the name given to those who oppose the whole idea of Zionism. And so the name was given Neturei Karta. Actually, Neturei Karta is an old phrase in our teaching, in our literature. It goes back to a story which is told about a great man who came to a town and asked who are the guardians of the city, because the translation of the words Neturei Karta is guardians of the city. He asked who are the guardians of the city, and they pointed to the soldiers and to the police. And he said, oh no, he said, they're not the guardians of the city. The guardians of the city are the righteous people who with their righteous deeds help the city to live in the right way, and they bring about the well-being of the city. So they are the Neturei Karta, they are the guardians of the city. And this name was coined again in the 1920s when the Zionists started to become quite a force in Palestine. And the phrase was coined by the old Yishuv, as it was known, the old population, Orthodox Jewish population of Palestine, who were opposed to Zionism, and they called themselves Neturei Karta. But it's not, as I said, it's not a formal organization. Any Orthodox Jew who opposes Zionism, both on religious ground and on humanitarian grounds, is automatically part of Neturei Karta. And you ask, what's the reason why we support the Palestinian people? Well, as I explained, part of the problem with Zionism is the humanitarian wrongs that it does to the occupants, the indigenous occupants of Palestine, the Palestinian people, and we oppose an organization which wishes to do wrong to the indigenous population. And in fact, the relationship between Palestinian and Jewish people goes back hundreds, possibly thousands of years, and it was always friendly. They lived alongside each other, and the whole problem only arose when Zionism came along and when the Palestinians realized that here was a group of people who wanted to take over their land. Now, the next one, I mean, there's more to say on this, but that's enough for the moment. The next point you asked was some people believe that Neturei Karta is an anti-Semitic organization because of its non-recognition of Israel. Well, and you asked me what I say about those accusations. You cannot accuse Jewish people of being anti-Semitic. We are very much in support of our brethren. We want to help our brethren. But because Zionism has its problems, and in fact it causes a confrontation between the occupants of Palestine and the indigenous population. So this in fact harms the existing Jewish population that was in Palestine. It brought about a lot of harm. And on the contrary, our opposition to Zionism is not anti-Semitic. It's actually in support of the well-being of the Jewish people, because we consider that Zionism is the biggest disaster that's happened to the Jewish people in the last 150 years. If you look at the history, look at the tens of thousands of Jews who have been killed. Apart from Palestinians, many, many more thousands of Palestinians have been killed, but tens of thousands of Jews have been killed because of the Zionist idea. So our opposition to Zionism is for the well-being of the Jewish people, and it is ludicrous to say that Neturei Karta would be an anti-Semitic organization. You asked me, have I personally been attacked or persecuted for being a member of this organization? Well, as I said, I'm not a member of this organization. I adhere to the Jewish Orthodox way of life, and as I explained, that automatically the authentic Jewish Orthodox way of life opposes Zionism. And yeah, one can say that those members of the Orthodox Jewish people who are prepared to stand up in public and say that they oppose Zionism, they are the real Neturei Karta. And the Zionists have been spectacularly successful in their propaganda, in spreading, in obtaining support in the world at large and even among the Jewish people for their idea. Originally, when Zionism started, it was opposed by the vast majority of the Jewish people. It's only as time went on, particularly the Second World War, it gained popularity. So what has happened now is that, sadly, the majority of the Jewish people do support Zionism. But the minority, and a healthy minority, understand that Zionism is bad for the Jewish people. But they are opposed and criticized by that majority who think that Zionism is good. And that majority who think that Zionism is good often oppose quite violently those who oppose Zionism. And you asked whether I've been attacked or persecuted. Well, sadly, I have experienced over the years quite a number of different forms of attack because of my opposition to Zionism, my support for the wish that Zionism comes to an end, peacefully, of course. There has been, I've had over the years various things happening to me. My car was damaged, my house was plastered with eggs, was shot at with air guns and all sorts of things. So I have been attacked or persecuted, as you asked, but so that's life. One has to carry on. If the thing is right, one has to be able to be prepared to carry on. You asked the next thing, what do I think is Israel's purpose in inviting the Jews of the world to live in the occupied Palestinian territories? Well, of course, first of all, Israel, the so-called state of Israel, is the result of Zionism as such. It's the practical result of Zionism. And their idea is to make a state of their own, and they want to spread themselves out all over Palestine, including not just the part of Palestine they succeeded in obtaining illegally in 1948, but also the other part, which they took over later on in 1967. And they want to entrench themselves everywhere, including what is known as the occupied Palestinian territories. And they want this entrenchment to be enforced. So that's their idea of inviting Jews to go and live there, to create what they call facts on the ground, which have sadly succeeded in a large way of doing, putting hundreds of thousands of Jewish people illegally in a country, in part of it. Well, all the country doesn't belong to them, but in that part which wasn't accepted by the world at large as belonging to them. But they didn't look at that, and their purpose was to try and enforce their idea. And finally, you asked, is the reason for our organization's opposition, well, I explained it's not an organization, is the reason for Neturei Karta opposition to the existence of Israel more political or religious? Well, I think I've explained that as well. It's certainly not political. We're not politicians. If we were, we would perhaps do more to try politically to upset the Zionist agenda. But we're not politicians. We try to live our lives in a religious way, in the way in which we are taught is the correct way. And as I explained earlier, our position is definitely religious, both on religious belief grounds and on our opposition to the humanitarian problems of Zionism. And our prayer is really, so you asked right at the beginning, why we support the Palestinian people. I think what I've said probably explains many of the points. And our prayer, I always end up with this, is that the time should come when the Zionist idea should be dismantled completely, peacefully, not with loss of life, but should be dismantled peacefully and be replaced by a regime in Palestine which would be acceptable to all the occupants of Palestine, whether Jewish or non-Jewish or anybody else. And there could be complete peace in Palestine if that came about, and if people were able to live there without this idea of taking over somebody else's land against the wishes of the indigenous population. I've touched on a number of points, as I can't go through everything this afternoon, but I hope that this has given you some idea of the Neturei Karta approach to Zionism, and our wish as to what would happen and what should happen in the world, eventually to be followed by the revelation over the whole world of the glory of the Almighty. Thank you very much.